Something is happening in the world and it's hard to look away. Sometimes it feels like the worst of human behavior is not just happening, it's winning. So, what I want to do is, I want to explore why evil seems to always win. You're going to get basically a mental framework on how to understand what's happening around you and how human systems work, and why the world seems to reward cruelty over doing what's right. This is not about what's right and what's wrong or looking for who to blame. It's more an investigation, a way to see the mechanics behind what's actually happening. So, before I start, I do want to say that some of the topics that I'm going to cover are deeply disturbing and you might feel uncomfortable. I can't use certain words when I'm trying to explain this because YouTube obviously will censor it. But the ideas themselves are essential. Everything that I say is speculation and theorizing, is basically giving you the mental tools to understand patterns of human behavior. But nothing here is presented as absolute truth. It's just showing you a different way of thinking about things and how to think about things. So I want to start by looking at the modern world. You've seen images online, violence, devastation, communities trapped in impossible situations. But what's striking is not just the suffering itself, but how visible it is. It's almost as if the worst things are done not quietly, but openly in front of the whole world. But why? Why does human cruelty sometimes feel designed to be seen? So I did some research, and history offers some clues. I've seen that across time, societies have often turned extreme acts into public ritual, acts meant to unify those committing them and create a clear division between them and the rest of the world. For example, the Aztecs practiced public sacrifice before battle. The Phoenicians were accused of sacrifices by their neighbors. Romans paraded defeated enemies in triumphs before executing them. Across history, extreme acts of violence were rarely random. They had a purpose, and that purpose was cohesion, synchronization, and power. And what we see in the modern world echoes this pattern. So, to understand this, I want to draw a picture for you. So, imagine a scenario in what was once called Judea. Picture a small, enclosed region, modern but constrained. Geography and political pressure make it nearly impossible to leave. Life here is tense, resources are scarce. There are people of different backgrounds, religions, languages, and ages. They cannot escape, and they can't fully trust outsiders. In this environment, survival and unity become paramount, most important. People have a choice. They can scatter, compete, and fail, or find a reason to align, to fight together, to act as one. And when they align, they become more effective, far more effective than their individual strengths would predict. But the alignment comes at a cost. Cohesion requires shared rituals, shared narratives, shared enemies. and it often requires transgression, acts that are morally or socially forbidden outside the group. For example, you know how gangs, to get into the gang, you have to be jumped into the gang, right? Now, people from outside this group, this gang, are going to look at that and say, that's crazy. But what that actually does is it bonds the person entering the gang together with the original members of the gang. Now they feel closer. That's cohesion. Now, transgression would just mean going through things together that pull them and make them more unified. For example, like using the gang for an example, if one of the gang members dies in a battle between a rival gang, that makes that gang closer to each other because they all experience the same transgression, the same loss. Now, back to the thought experiment back in Judea. Imagine 100 people here, ranging from teenagers to elders. Initially, they're divided, disconnected by language, culture, and personal fear. Their instinct is to survive individually, to hide. But the situation is hopeless if they do so. Outside forces are way stronger than them. So gradually, they develop a common language. They share stories of past struggles and future visions. They have myths that form, leaders who emerge amongst them. Not always the wisest or strongest, but those willing to demonstrate ultimate commitment. Imagine one young person shows enough courage through some symbolic self sacrifice, and everyone else recognizes the devotion and chooses to follow that person. Then you have the older, experienced members advise, and the young and bold members lead behind the ultimate leader who shows that he's willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for this group. So, through shared danger, shared narrative, and shared rituals, they achieve cohesion, and cohesion leads to synchronization, the ability to act as one, to anticipate each other, to respond instantly without speaking. This is not hypothetical. It mirrors what humans have always done in high pressure situations. Battlefield units, religious cults, revolutionary movements. The mechanism is still the same: shared risk, shared transgression, and shared purpose. History gives us examples of this. We have the Spartans, who trained their youth in extreme hardship, even brutality, to ensure cohesion and loyalty. The sacred band of Thebes paired warriors to create intense bonds, producing elite fighting units. Macedonians adapted and expanded these methods to conquer vast territories. These examples illustrate a principle. Groups that unify through risk, ritual, and shared taboos gain power over those who remain divided, cautious, or morally restrained. So now, knowing this, it brings me to the question, which is the whole point of the video. How does evil always win? In these situations, acts that seem morally reprehensible often succeed because they create alignment and cohesion. Systems of cruelty or transgression concentrate power. They synchronize thought, emotion, and action within a group. They allow coordinated strategies that would be impossible in a morally cautious population. This is the paradox. The evil actions that shock the world often succeed precisely because they break the rules. They exploit social taboos. They force secrecy and compel loyalty. Those who act with moral restraint may feel righteous, but they are disorganized. Those who transgress, who unify, who act in brutal harmony, these are the ones who dominate outcomes. Think of it as a game. The world is a million player game where coordination beats solitary virtue, secretive collaboration, reinforced by shared transgression, ensures success for the few, while the morally constrained remain fragmented, divided, and powerless. You can think about it like this. Let's say there's a village, and you know the soil under that village has a lot of gold. So, morally, what you want to do is you want to find a way to make a deal so that way you're able to obtain it without hurting anyone because that's morally right. But the people of that village might not want to deal with you. But let's say there's a group of people who know about this gold that's under this village. But instead of trying to be morally right, they plan in a way that's brutal. They say, let's go in together and let's just burn down the entire village. And then we'll take it for ourselves. Now, for the person who's morally constrained, they don't have that type of power in organization to do something in a unified manner that's so brutal, that's so powerful to achieve that objective. Because the people who would be protecting it aren't thinking that someone is thinking so dirty to obtain what they have. So, although they see themselves as never being able to morally accept doing this to another person, they are not going to be preparing for another person to exceed that type of moral corruptness, which leaves them unorganized to defend against it. It gives the other person an edge who isn't as morally aligned. So, if we go back to our scenario, which we made the scenario in Judea, the enclosed environment, the pressure, and the visibility create conditions where extreme acts both unite the population and attract attention. The group's identity strengthens through shared transgression, shared risk, and the perception of a common enemy. This explains why some acts of cruelty seem overt, almost performative. The intention is not to hide, but to consolidate power. Consolidate power, focus loyalty, and synchronize action. Visibility becomes part of the mechanism. The world sees the transgression, reacts with moral outrage, and the group internalizes this external attention as further validation of cohesion. Even when outsiders judge, even when the moral order condemns, the system works. Evil triumphs not because it is clever, but because it is synchronized, unified, organized, and relentless. Philosophers help us make sense of this. Kant is a famous philosopher who reminds us that reality is filtered by perception. We can't see the ultimate structure, only the world as it appears. Hegel proposes that spirit, essence, or alignment underlies material outcomes. Plato and Dante offer different approaches to meaning: the pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of love. Within these frameworks, what we call evil can be understood as the denial of alignment with truth or love, or in strategic terms, the deliberate creation of cohesion through transgression. This doesn't justify it, but it helps explain why it often succeeds. So, how does evil always win? It thrives in pressure, in isolation, in shared transgression, and in the synchronization of those willing to act when others hesitate. It's rarely chaotic, it's rarely random. It follows rules, hidden ones, that reward unity, coordination, and relentless focus. And we, as observers, must understand these dynamics, not to replicate them, but to see the world clearly, to see the patterns behind what seems like chaos, cruelty, or chance. Because understanding is the first step toward response, reflection, and ultimately choice.